Mike, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about summer melt and ways to reduce it, because we know it. If you're in enrollment, and if you're not, feel free to join us on this side of campus. But if you're in enrollment, that's probably top of mind right now. So we wanted to bring in an expert, and man, did we bag an expert.
Yes, we've been talking to our guest for almost an hour now. He's having technical difficulties with his camera, so you'll see his name on the screen as Bob Johnson. Bob is a higher ed veteran, has held countless positions in leadership and marketing, currently a consultant. Bob Johnson, I wanted to invite you on and say hi to the folks and a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello to everybody, and it's good to see so many people here for what is obviously an important topic. And I hope that we'll be able to contribute some specific things that might help people reduce that melt as much as possible. You can't eliminate it completely, but you are certainly, from some examples we'll be talking about, can get it down from a peak level. So that's what I'll be looking forward to sharing, and the feedback. I'd like to hear feedback from people who are doing things similar to some of the things that I'll be talking about later, just so we can sort of spread the universe of examples as much as possible.
There's nothing better than an expert that wants to learn.
Right.
We love it. So it's a community. Let's all learn from each other. So the topic is melt. We're going to talk about some strategies to help reduce melt. Mike, I think an important thing to start with when we're having this conversation is warning signs, the warning signs of melt.
Yes. Well, there's lots of reasons why people might melt, and we'll talk about those. But some easy ways to diagnose melt right off the bat are generally when a student or their family members go quiet, if they fall behind on task, whether that be in the enrollment process or financial aid anywhere else. So we want to keep an eye out for that. Bob, are there any other potential warning signs typically that you see, maybe that a student is becoming disinterested in an institution?
Well, one in particular that I would mention for anyone that is dealing with a significant population of lower income and or first generation and college students is whether or not they've had the misfortune to be selected for financial aid verification process. That will tank a high percentage of students in that category. I'm doing some recent research on that, and the percentage is fairly high, and the percentage of students being selected for verification appears to be going up. So I would hope that the relationship between admission counselors and potential students, who, particularly those who have deposited or indicated they're coming, is strong enough to know who's been selected for verification, and feel free to proactively contact those people and ask them if they need any help. And we'll come back to that later. That's probably the one single factor for that population in particular, which definitely destroys the college-bound intentions of probably 25 to 30% of people in that group who are selected for verification. That's a pretty high number.
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to say, like, the thing about melt, that it's hard to understand why a student would choose a college and start, signing up to go to that college and maybe even deposit and then just go away. It's easier to understand when you start to think about and get into the perspective and the state of mind of that student. And that's important to do when thinking about why a student would melt, just looking at things through their point of view. And financial aid is a big part of that. Like, if you get into the mind of a student going through all these tough decisions and what they're doing, the finances can really lock up, their desires, I guess.
I'd agree with that. And Bob, would you say that, having like a CSS profile or using something beyond FAFSA sometimes can trigger those reviews?
Anything in the financial aid process can trigger people who are not familiar with it dropping out. So CSS, if you use that, yes. The FAFSA can weed people out sooner. The FAFSA can keep people from ever getting to where they melt from your school. And that's why, if we wanted to back this up a bit, it's really important to help students, particularly first generation students, with completing the FAFSA in the first place. And if you were to go on my newsletter site and look up what I wrote about the University of Toledo, has one of the absolutely best website contents, and I link right to it, on how to help students complete the FAFSA and who to contact if they have questions with it. Most schools that I have visited with that just throw people right into the FAFSA site. And that's cruel and unusual punishment to do that. And the University of Toledo, big public university in Toledo, Ohio, does a remarkably good job, better than anything I've seen before, in helping people take that initial step. And if you can get through the initial FAFSA well and comfortably, they actually have a video at the University of Toledo where a student says, and they allow her to say this, completing the FAFSA is a very stressful event. And I've never seen anybody be that honest about it before. So I think be upfront all the way through the process with the fact that this is difficult and stressful, and then find a way to be there to help people from the initial FAFSA through the verification process, which is going to knock some of your people out during the summer. Our
wonderful producer, Lexi Croysdale, has put the link in the chat to the newsletter, Bob, that you're referring to on Toledo specifically. So anyone interested in reading up on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And full disclosure for the audience, unless it comes off like us just cheerleading our clients, they are clients. So we didn't plan for that, but we are very excited to talk about.
And
that.
Mike being from Toledo, this is just hearing the word Toledo. It's the most excited you can possibly be.
People
I did not know they were clients. I had no idea they were clients, so I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's not a problem at all.
So, Bob, outside of, financial aid and financial issues, what are other issues that typically cause a student or a family to melt?
Well, I don't think anything comes close to the financial aspect of it, whether it's verification or anything else. I think financial is the number one. There's certainly a population that will, quote, melt because they have deposited at more than one school, which is a phenomenon that has increased over the last few years. And at some point they have to pick a school. So they're going to give up the deposit. May ask to get it back, I guess, I don't know, but they're going to give up the extra deposits. I don't know how widespread a phenomenon that is. From what I read, it certainly is a concern for some schools, and some schools do lose students over that. I don't know what you can really do to intervene there. Those students are probably going to enrolling at the school that they have the best ongoing personal relationship with at the institution, either in their major or with their admission counselors. And I think one of the things that a lot of schools could do earlier on to separate themselves from the other potential schools is to set up a relationship between the potential student and a faculty person and or a student in the area they plan to major in. Because at this point, they're pretty serious. They may change after they get to your school, but at this point, they're interested in most students, not everybody, but most students are interested in a particular major. And that's an area where the whole recruitment process from the time of the first inquiry through to enrollment, not many schools do a good job of linking people up with their major. And it really should start, and I'm not trying to hijack the conversation here, it really should start at the beginning of the recruitment process. There's a wise woman at Siena College near Albany who said on Twitter once, conversion starts from the very first contact you make with a student. And in all my years of secret shopping, I've only seen two schools that communicated with a student at the inquiry point about the major they said they were interested in when they completed the inquiry form. Was a regional branch campus in the University of Wisconsin. So the more you make these earlier contacts and develop them, the less concern you have with student melt when you finally get to that particular process. And these people that are still tossing around between 2 or 3 schools, they're going to end up going to the school, finances aside for the moment, where they have the strongest relationship with something that matters to them at the institution.
And that reach out could be just as simple as a text or an email,
Could.
making yourself available for questions. Even if they don't have specific questions, the student knowing that they have somewhere to turn if they do have questions, even if they never ask a question through the process, just knowing that could help nurture that relationship.
Right.
Excellent. Yeah. Love seeing all these schools pop on here. Go Rockets, as Toledo is being mentioned. We got so many new schools. This is awesome. Bearcats, Cardinals, love that. Don't be afraid to use the Q&A to ask questions. Lexi is going to be lining up questions for Mike and I and for our guest as we go a little further into this conversation. So use that. And if you do want to come on and ask a question, just let Lexi know in the chat and we'll make that happen because we want this to be your conversation too.
Right.
So other than finances, you mentioned that's the main concern, and that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, just confusion in processes and how hard it is to get through that enrollment cycle, I would imagine would you rank that as the number 2 biggest factor in MELT, Bob?
Yeah, I would, and I'll make a reference now, and people can Google this on their own too, to Georgia State University and work they've done since about 2016 to reduce MELT. And one of the things they found out when they were trying to figure out why they were losing as many students as they were, was they were sending in this end process, and I'm reading from my notes here, 300 emails from 80 different offices at Georgia State.
Oh, wow.
All arriving at the deposited students over the course of a few weeks. And you can imagine what that's like. I mean, there's no particular coordination in this. It was just confusing the hell out of people. And it made it very difficult for them. The exact quote they used once was, should I pay attention to how to reserve a locker in the athletic facility or something about my financial aid process? They found out that most of these emails were never opened at all. It was just an uncoordinated tidal wave of stuff being thrown at the group. And so my encouragement here would be, do what Georgia State, whether you're a big school or a little school. I see Rosemont College is here. That was my very first consulting place in the 1980s in Philadelphia. Whether you're a little school or a big school, really doesn't make any difference. Audit how many emails are going from how many offices in what period of time, and how many of them anybody is bothering to open. You don't want to be in the Georgia State position, and they've made some changes we can talk about in a bit later to pull away from that, to prioritize what was most important and why people were dropping out. But that's the first thing they identified, was just confusion. They were creating confusion on the part of their students coming in as to what those people should be doing. Some of them just threw up their hands at it. And they particularly mentioned at Georgia State, it was heaviest with the first generation students who were just unfamiliar with what the process was. If you're the third, fourth kid in your family, and maybe your parents have been to school and 2 of their children have been to school, yeah, you can kind of roll with this a little bit. But if you've not been through this before, you're just in kind of an, oh my God situation. And so that's the first thing they discovered was a real problem that they had.
Bob, if I may ask, if you created your own institution, Bob Johnson University, who would own that? Like, who would own the strategy for who sends what, when, and who gets rubber stamped and who doesn't?
That's an important but a horrible question, because it's going to vary so much from campus to campus.
Gotcha.
That it's really difficult. I mean, ideally, there would be a central coordinating contact point. I don't know that it would still be the marketing. I would hope it would be the admissions people, because the admissions people, when I worked in admissions people were basically told, you don't let go of a student until they're sitting in a classroom. The admissions people did the early financial aid estimates. Admissions people called their deposited students when they got a financial aid award letter and asked them, did they understand it? Were there any questions with it? I would hope that the person most responsible for admissions would have the respect and the authority, and both of them would be important, to be able to explain, like Georgia State did, the confusion that too many uncoordinated emails was calling, and would at least try to get a large, I would go for voluntary participation in a sort of screen combined effort first. And always try to get, people to come on board voluntarily. I'm sure that some would. Celebrate the ones who do, tell the whole campus they're doing it, maybe try to embarrass the ones who refuse to give up and want to send it out on their own. I'm not even talking about necessarily, telling them exactly what the content has to be, but just try to get a coordinated schedule of what's going on. So that they're not getting 3, 4, 5 a day on different topics. That's what causes people not to, just not to answer anything.
Yeah, it's and I know it's not always in the control of our audience members or the folks they work with, but it does stress the importance of inter department communication. Would be intra. Is it okay?
Inter.
Different departments
Inter.
communicating with each other. That's inter.
Inter.
Intra would be you communicating.
with
Okay,
everyone,
well, I'm the writer. I should have known that.
yeah.
But the importance of communicating with other departments and getting on the same page, having some kind of set time where you can meet and talk about the communications that you're sending. So a problem like Bob referenced does not arise, I guess.
You'll always get people to sign up voluntarily. And I think that's just where you start. And you'll never, no matter what kind of campus you are, you'll get some people who want to do it and some people who don't. And you want to work with the ones who do, and at least reduce that as much as possible with the least friction on campus. After that, it kind of depends on who you know and what kind of weight you have to get people to do things. And there may be a handful that you have to coerce into it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I love that we have some questions pouring in that we're going to get to. Do you have a question before that, or do you want to get to the panel questions that are coming in?
Yeah, I kind of want to hear what our audience is asking.
Okay.
actually.
If Lexi's available to start serving up some questions, and if you're hearing questions, audience participation is encouraged. So get yours in there as well. So Lexi, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, our first question comes from Laurel. They ask, what can be done about massive emails? Any tips on that?
So the amount of email, I'm not sure if you mean, Laurel, and maybe you can clarify in that. Do you mean like the amount of emails you have to send in, or the number of people you have to email? I'm assuming you mean the number of emails you have to send throughout the enrollment process.
Or perhaps even the amount of copy too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So a little clarification is needed in terms of like shortening copy. I'd love to, I'm always wanting to talk about that, but Laurel has specified that she means the number of emails a student does receive. So coordinated effort and planning, making sure that you touch the most, or that you hit on the most important touch points. I do think this, Laurel, if you're sending an email or a text or any kind of communication with the student that is helpful to them, you're not sending too many. They might not always respond to every email, and they might need that nudge. Don't forget that some of the responsibilities on the student that they want to go to school, and it's everyone's job to make sure that they get through that cycle, but they need those reminders just as you would need reminders for things going on in your life. So as long as you're not spamming them, then there isn't too many emails. Does that sound right to you?
With that. Yeah, it always comes back to intention, right? So if the goal is to give people information, and if you're sending, so Bob mentioned the lockers in the athletic facility, sending that to the entire deposited population institution makes zero sense.
Mhm.
Sending that to people who indicate, yeah, I had interest in intramurals, I have an interest in being a Division I athlete, that makes sense. So making sure your audience is really tailored to that particular message. Or sorry, flip that. Your message is really tailored to that particular audience.
Okay. And Bob, if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it.
I guess I just double back on that Georgia State point of knowing how many emails and which emails are being opened or not. Will be some data that may help persuade people that they don't need to do as much, or they're not, there's a need to coordinate it or reduce the number, because you can send too many emails in a single day. And that's the real, they get 5-6 emails in a single day. That's not good. So I would say have the data. I don't know how they collected it at Georgia State, but they were able to look at all those emails I mentioned earlier. What did I say? 300 from 80 different offices. And they knew what was happening to them. And that helped them create some other solutions in the problem because they knew what the results of the email were. And your system should be telling you that who's opening it and who's not. Just like I can tell with my email processing system, who's clicking, who's reading, who's doing whatever. Should be able
Yeah,
to
obviously,
do that.
we're in the world of texting. We have a texting platform called Cadence that has that information readily available on a dashboard on what texts have been responded to, open, and things like that. So I'm sure CRM with email information, it's not too hard to find that out.
And moving to a texting system was very important in the Georgia State reduce summer melt process. They moved to an artificial intelligence fueled texting system. The first summer they used it in 2016. I'm reading from their notes again. They answered 200,000 text emails from their entire population. Someone said they would have had to hire 10 full-time staff to be able to have handled that. A very small number of those required personal contact from a live person, and they were able to sort those out as well. But by going to a text system, they called it Pounce. This blew my mind, but it's a big school, Georgia State. So 200,000 questions were received from their incoming freshman population the first year they used it. And the only way they could answer those was by putting in place that kind of an automated system.
Automation's key. We got that. Lexi, do you have another question for us?
Yes, our next question comes from Jenny. She asks, typically, how is the participation for summer student and family engagement events? Some examples she put: FAFSA nights, orientation, etc.
So I'd love people to give their input at their schools, their experience with that too. But Mike, do you have a response on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of variables. Are those going to be virtual events? Is the expectation for people to come on your campus? If there is an expectation for that, how many of your students are coming from, your local market, your area versus coming overnight, et cetera? All those will have impacts. One of the things I would encourage you to do with all your events is to think about bringing your campus to people rather than forcing them to come to your campus. So there are some events, welcome weekend, there's no way to move into a residence hall virtually. So just going to have to happen, but there are lots of ways we can make orientation shorter and more to the point by putting it on Zoom or putting it in a self-guided method, so people can fill out the forms or hear the particular information they need to hear, but making a way that's much more accessible for people.
Yeah, if you can get participation, campus events, virtual events, anything you can use to engage with students certainly is one of the strategies that we would recommend for combating melt. Yeah. Bob, do you have anything on the question about participation for summer student and family engagement events?
I have nothing particular on that, and I would love to hear from other people too who have did something that they know kicked up the participation level. If there's anyone here who's willing to share that.
Okay. If I may share an idea, I don't want to name specific institutions because I don't know if I'm
We'll call it Bob Johnson University.
There you go. Yeah, the Fighting Bobs. So we work with a number of institutions who will have current students, tech students, once they are accepted in the institution. I agree with Bob. I think bringing in current students to text with prospective students earlier in the process, I think makes sense. Maybe not at the inquiry phase, but maybe at the applied phase. I don't like using the term funnel, but if we're using funnel, that's probably where I would bring them in. And a number of those institutions will do that based on academic area. Makes total sense. For your students who haven't indicate a particular academic program or major yet, one of the great workarounds is geography. So there's a very large institution in the Northwest. They actually, all of their orientation staff members, all of their first year student RAs, part of their job is actually answering text and texting with students based on their geographic area, right? So I grew up in the glass capital of the world, so Ohio, go Rockets. And, if I was working at an institution, I might have all the people in the northern half of Ohio. as an example, or, the Detroit, Cleveland kind of area,
Okay.
is how an institution might do it. So I'd recommend that.
I love it. And Lexi has put it out there in the chat. So it's an audience question. The onus is on you, audience. So what does participation for summer events look like on your campus? So feel free to chat away on that. If you don't have anything to add, someone just asked a question that I want to jump to, and I'm going to ask Lexi to jump to, because it was a very important thing in terms of MELT. And Lexi, can you read Sean's question that he just put up into the chat?
Yeah, so Sean asks, where does parent-guardian contact factor in with reducing summer melt?
Near the top. Super important to engage parents in the process. So reaching out to parents is a critical step in reducing melt. Now, when we're talking about melt, sometimes we're talking about first generation students. Sometimes we're talking about post-generational students, or students that don't have a parent or guardian to lean on for this experience. So that needs to be said for this particular topic, that might not always be a factor. But if there are parents and guardians that can help with the process, it's important to make them your ally.
I'd agree with that completely. And the earlier, the better.
Yeah.
Bob, what do you think?
I'm going to go back to the earlier, the better. People have been talking about how to increase contact with parents. That was a topic 30 years ago, and it's a topic now. And there aren't a whole lot of schools that are doing a really good job of that. But the earlier, the better. And I'm just going to repeat that. And then it's there when it needs to be at this critical melt point. You're not trying to establish a relationship with a parent. Then at that point, it's probably too late, to be honest, at that point. But parents are very interested in the whole recruitment cycle. I don't use the funnel word either, the F word. I don't use that word, but the whole recruitment cycle. And the earlier you can involve them in what's going on, the better off you'll be.
We don't like to repeat ourselves, but sometimes we have to, and we'll only do it when it helps. But when we talk about parent engagement, get a separate contact for parents if at all possible. Set up a parent page on your website for frequently asked questions, and just making yourself available. So those tips are things that we often share on our FYI episodes, and they're always true. So while you said for 30 years this has been a topic, the topic hasn't changed, and schools are still trying to find better ways to do that. But that is because parenting and parents themselves have changed too. Like the way they engage with their own children too has changed. So I guess the target's always moving in terms of like trying to contact parents.
And Bob, you wouldn't, I mean, to me, I think the struggle for some institutions is, the whole loco parentis thing, right? They want to enable students to be adults, to follow their processes. It's not telling parents, hey, do fill out this housing deposit for Susie's student. It's, just reminding Susie to do it, right? Like basically bringing them as allies. Would that be the right interpretation of that?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. We have some.
I'm reading the comments that are coming up here, and there's
Yep.
actually some pretty good comments coming up here. So I hope everybody has a chance to read through.
Well, we'll bring them up right now because
Yeah.
Pamela has come through, and it was it's jumping back to what we were talking previously before parents, but talking about events over the summer to help reduce melt, self-paced orientation, face-to-face, and virtual orientation. CTC offered an open house, and it was a big success. So they did it toward the end of April, which is
A little early. I like it.
That's early, but they said it was a huge success. So
Pamela, if I may ask, the acronym CTC, sorry, I'm not familiar with that one. I don't know if that's the institution's name.
Central Technical College. It's in the middle.
Yeah, we'll find
I
out.
thought you'd know. You know.
I
everything,
usually
like,
do. Oh, Chattahoochee.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Chattahoochee, of course.
yeah.
Yes.
Now you're upset
Yes.
that you didn't know.
I know.
that.
I
Yeah.
am upset. I shouldn't know that.
Yeah, excellent. So
Yes.
Amanda, always helpful, helps in, jumps in with financial aid coaching, is a growing use case for techs. Staff will send a calendar link for the family. That sets everything up way ahead of time. That's my words, not Amanda. Now I'm back to Amanda. We'll send a calendar link for the family to schedule the Zoom call to work through any questions or barriers. It's very personal and goes back to Bob's point earlier. So awesome. I love it. I love when people get
I know.
involved with the chat or community. And
We have one more example from Claire as well.
Good.
Claire said one thing they're trying this year for the first time at Carroll University is inviting incoming freshmen to our summer picnic / cookout / concert event. This event is typically geared toward current Carroll students, but we felt it could be a great way to involve incoming students and help them build a sense of community before even getting there. That's a great idea.
I love that.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for getting us back on track, Lexi.
Yes, and if I may throw it out there on Claire's point, I know there are some folks I recognize that aren't in enrollment that do fundraising. This is a great way to work with your alumni communities, particularly if you're a smaller, more regional institution, if you have regional chapters, to bring them on, right? So if you're a campus in, I don't know, let's say Buffalo, New York, and you have a alumni chapter in, I don't know, Boston, you could host an event in Boston for those deposited students to make them kind of feel like they're part of the community without them having to drive 8 hours to Buffalo or fly here, etc.
Bob, I would get to another question unless there was something that came up that you wanted to chime in on.
I'd probably just to quickly stay with the Georgia State example. In addition to all of the texting they did with the 200,000 answers and so forth, when they got finished analyzing what happened in 2015 and why they lost so many students, they went back and set up a special portal that they could direct students to with specific important steps to take online that they could find. They didn't have that before. Maybe many of you do. But in other words, they tried to find a single place where all of the steps covered in those 300 emails from the 80 offices were located in one place. And that may be a way to get those 80 offices to participate too. It assures them they will be included in the process, but it's laid out, and I have not visited myself because I'm not an accepted student there, but that was one of the things they wanted to do, get everything in one place. It reduces the need for the 80 emails, and then they can track individual students as they complete the steps in the process. So they can go in, they can look at their portal and students in it, and they can see who's not moving along and who is moving along, and then create a personal intervention with someone who isn't completing the steps the way they should be. And the ones who are, they're fine. They, part of the game here in any kind of like direct marketing effort is to identify those who need the help the most or who seem to be wavering. This portal helps them do that because they're tracking the deposit paid, maybe the whole admitted student group, I'm not sure, but at least the deposit paid student group as they move towards the actual registration period, the actual enrollment period.
Focusing your energy. Excellent. I know a couple more comments have come in and perhaps a question as well. Lexi, you want to give us a couple of comments that just came in?
Yeah, so Rachel and her institution have had great success with yield events in coordination with their alumni clubs. And then Pamela reiterated that they chose to do their event in April so it wouldn't conflict with prom, graduation, and other summer activities.
Getting the work out of the way before the fun starts when you have students more focused. I like it. So shaking things up as well. And in terms of coordinating with alumni and that department, we talk about cross department. What was it? Inter-department communication. Intra.
Sorry, no, inter.
You got me all messed up.
I got you messed up.
It's inter-department communication, so important. Everyone can help each other on that. What is that? A rising tide?
Raises all boats.
Mike has all the answers. So yes. Go ahead, Lexi.
All right. So our next question, Barbara and Juan ask similar questions. They'd like some tips on how often to contact students over the summer months. What would be a good frequency in regards to emails and text?
Yeah. So I'm going to defer to Bob, but first, I'd like to attempt.
You coward.
Well, no. I'm gonna even attempt. So I would argue that for texting, I would say no one should receive more than 2 texts a week. But a big caveat there.
Not including back and forth conversations.
Correct, right.
So, yeah.
But a caveat to that would be, again, intentionality, right? So there are times you're working with a student who, I don't know, maybe they're enrolling a semester early, they're trying to take some summer classes. it might make sense for you to be more hands-on with them because there's more urgency, and what you need to get done with them is just needs to happen quicker. But I would say in general, all things being equal, whatever cliche, probably no more than once or twice a week.
Okay, Bob, it's your turn.
Yeah, and I wouldn't add too many more email to that as well. Certainly more than once a day is a no-no, I would say. And I say that because I've seen schools sending as many as 3 recruitment emails in a single day because they hire different people to do them and they don't coordinate the way they're done. I would hate to see that happening during this final stage as well, because that's when people just start to tune out. I think that the Georgia State portal approach reduces the need to send emails at all. You'll still send emails, you'll still send texts at critical points, but you can reduce the number significantly if you have all of the steps you're emailing and texting people to do in a single place where they can go. And then if you're in a text situation, the text can go to people who are not moving through that portal step the way they should be. And again, I would hope, and this again depends on the size of the school and the size of the staff, but it's certainly possible that a lot of schools, that these contacts would continue to come from the relationships they've built with admission counselors as long as possible into the summer, rather than somebody they've never met or don't know. And that should, now that's based on the idea that particular school has a territorial recruitment system where counselors, recruiters, whatever you want to call them, are responsible for a group of people as they move through the whole recruitment cycle, and particularly as they visit campus and apply. And that builds up a relationship. I had an admissions counselor once tell me, my goal is if a person doesn't enroll that I've been working with, I want them to know they made me cry because I'm that disappointed they're not coming. So as strong a relationship as you can build with them, and then continue that as far through the system as you can. So that person is the one who goes into the portal and checks whether their students are going through the system or not, or going through. And if they need an intervention at some point, ideally it will come from that admission counselor. And they wouldn't have to do it with everybody.
Right.
They'll only have to do it with some. Remember, we're focusing on a hopefully, much less than half the group here. We probably have 25% maybe of students who are at high risk of not enrolling. And that's the point we want to concentrate on. So it's not like, oh my God, how could we possibly do that? Prioritize, take the ones that are most at risk. And it's the admission staff who should know the ones who are most at risk, and the ones who when we had admission counselors call and tell them they were admitted, and this is ancient days, right, with a telephone, but still today with a text or anything else, and they would grade the students excited beyond all means that they got admitted. Okay, they're not going to worry about those. Ambivalent about it, and could give a damn. The could give a damns got put aside. It was that middle group, which was most of the group, that people would concentrate on. If they could care less, they became not a priority. Didn't try to convert those people the same way. And if they were beyond, like they're in heaven, they could relax with those people and they could identify who to concentrate. So everybody's going to have their own system for doing that. The important thing is that we're chunkizing that group of admitted students per territory. So the closer we get to enrollment, the number shrinks that are still in doubt, but we know who those people are that are still at risk. And that's the key point. We're not trying to do the same thing with everybody because everybody's not at equal risk. We're trying to identify the ones who are.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction, that you would think people that don't give a damn, to take Bob's words, would be the ones that you would focus on. So,
Right.
yeah.
No.
Mike, I feel a transition coming on from you.
I do.
Yes.
So, Bob, you had mentioned that you would prefer that admissions basically shepherd the students until, they're in their first class. Sometimes that's not possible. What's sort of the best way to, for lack of a better term, hand off students from enrollment management, admissions to all the other functions on campus.
I heard Bob laughing. I think he's been Kochczynski'd.
Oh,
Well, I've often had people tell me it's not possible before they try to figure out how to do it.
okay.
And so I would push back just a little bit. I think it's much more possible than one might imagine. I had people tell me once people in both financial aid and admissions tell me there was no way admissions staff could give potential students an early financial aid estimate until they created the form they used in financial aid, taught the admissions people how to do it, and a year later, nobody in admissions would give up the financial aid contact because they knew if they did, they were less likely to enroll that student. So I want to really focus on that. Now, at some point, there is going to be a handoff, and there is usually going to be an on-campus orientation. And I don't want to get into specific details because that's done differently at every campus, but I think that's the critical point at which the potential student involved, whether it's online or whether it's on campus, begins to make a contact elsewhere with another significant person who's going to be there for them, preferably for the first couple of months they're on campus. The point at this point, and this time I would back off the admission staff, it's important for ongoing retention that people know where to have a specific contact to go to when they have a problem the first couple of months they're on campus, because a lot of people who will leave and won't stay are going to make that decision very early in their first semester at the school. And they're going to say, I'm getting out of here as soon as I can. They can't get out maybe right then, but they're thinking getting out. And you need a contact for them to help them through their problems. Somewhere around orientation would be the handoff. But I would not attempt to tell any individual school how that should be done, because orientation is so different. It's so many different, at so many different institutions.
Do you believe that undergraduate admission staff in particular should have a presence at those orientation sessions?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. I said, when I use that term handoff, that kind of is the handoff. They should be there and be visible to meet those, to meet their students who are coming to orientation and be part of the handoff. They should almost be, in some way introducing the handoff to people. Here's so-and-so who's the orientation, whatever that kind of person is, or, when they start to meet students involved in orientation and stuff like that, in some way appropriate to your system, but they shouldn't just disappear before it happens. I think that would be a real mistake to have them just vanish, not be there. They don't have to do all the work or anything like that. They just have to have visibility. If nothing else, they should thank the people for coming who came and say, I hope you enjoyed it and looking forward to the new contacts. If you still have any question, I'm still here for you.
Making yourself
I'm
available.
still here. Don't cut yourself off like that, because you're the person, you meaning the admissions person, you're the person they know best, or you should be the person they know best at your institution. So let them they will make the disconnect on their own, but don't arbitrarily cut it off and say, I never want to hear from you again. Because if you have a relationship with them, that's a bad way to end a relationship of any sort, including a student recruitment one.
Excellent. I think we might have a question or two left in the hopper. We still have some time to get your questions in if you'd like to add one to our Q&A. Lexi, have we missed a question on the queue here?
Yes, I've got some in the queue. Vera asks, Vera, if you're listening, we might need some clarification from you as well. They're asking, how do you personalize when the registration sessions often number 100 at one time? Maybe you could clarify, are you talking about in these sessions themselves or the communications regarding those registration sessions?
Okay, well, if it is the personalization within the communications, like, a texting platform can have, why is the word falling away from my memory, like
Fields.
fields. So fields that you can use to use the contact data that integrates with your texting platform. So they'll automatically see their name read back in their text. And I know there are email programs that have that as well. So there are tools you can use to personalize the actual email. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant, but if you're just talking about in terms of making the experience more personal, that would be a different matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'm not sure, Bob, if you had anything on that question. We're going to try and get clarification on exactly what she meant, but
Yeah, not to add to what you just said, no.
yeah. Okay. So talking about doing mass emails and making it personally, I would not suggest that someone in that seat tries to make an anecdote or a personal story with 100 emails that they have to send out, because it's just simply not enough time in a day to do that. I also don't think you have to be that personal in like a stage where you're just reaching out and trying to establish a relationship. So I don't think you have to be hyper personal, but there are ways to do so, and tools will help you do that. So and we'll see if we get further clarification. Maybe that answered the question, maybe it did not. So
Yeah.
until we get that, Lexi, go ahead with another question.
Yeah, so our next question comes from Josh. They ask, what advice do you have for a commuter campus focused on non-traditional student populations?
Okay,
love
so
that.
now you don't have so much of the campus experience. You don't have none, but it's not so much of students staying at the institution, but a commuter school for post-traditional. There are ways to make people feel like they are a part of your institution, and that does not have to be brick and mortar. It does not have to be, clubs and fraternities and sororities and things like that.
T-shirts.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are ways to just make people feel welcome at your institution by being excited and making them excited for the programs for which they're attending your institution. So you can call it branding if you're wearing a marketing hat, or you can just call it, making sure that you're paying attention and serving those students with questions that they might have. So that goes a long way. It's not just about what the campus looks like and whether you have a mountain like view from your campus or things like that. Like how you make students feel goes a long way toward making them feel welcome.
Right. Bob made a comment about bringing in faculty and staff earlier.
Yeah.
And I sort of elaborated on that by saying, students in particular academic programs. In fact, I think Bob said that as well. Same principles apply, right? Just because, you have accepted students and current students who all, grew up within a, 5-mile radius of the campus. That doesn't mean that the academic experience is going to be exactly the same for everybody in every academic program, right?
Yeah.
You can personalize it to those academic programs and make sure people feel a sense of belonging into those communities.
And make that community virtual. And also just consider if you're talking about students that might be commuting that might not have easy access to a campus, make sure that you're staggering event times to think about people that might be working second shift or different jobs, or trying to take care of daycare issues and things like that. So ask as many questions as possible each semester to make sure that you're serving students with things like that. So Bob, do you have anything to add?
One thing that just came to mind, we're not naming universities, but a very large university in the Midwest that has had great success from recruitment all the way through to enrollment with organizing groups of alumni around places where people work, where they know they have a significant population of students. They become recruiters on the one hand. They also become places where potential students can go and talk to people. So they have regular meetings periodically. I don't know how, not more than once a month. I don't know exactly how often, where all of the people who work at now this is an urban university in a big city. Most of the students are local, and most of the students go out and work in the local areas. So this wouldn't apply to every institution, but if this sounds at all like your particular school, this might be something to explore. Where do you have significant collections of alumni working within the same entity, the same organization? They're prime recruiters, and they can answer all kinds of questions about your school. And part of the quote orientation process of should be putting people into contact with those people who are already familiar with how the place works. And don't worry if I run into this from time to time. Some of those people aren't going to be happy campers.
Right.
that's okay. Not everybody, it's artificial to say everybody who graduated from your institution loves the place. Some of them don't, but most of them probably think pretty well of it. And so I just wouldn't worry about the odd curmudgeon who, post nasty things on Facebook or something, as long as most people are not. As long as most people are saying good things about you.
Right. So Bob, actually, we talked about this in our prep. There's an institution I toured. It was in my top 3. And my mom, to just catch tour guides off guard, she loved to ask about the party culture on campus. And I remember that tour guide said, actually, I'm hungover right now while I give this tour. And obviously my parents were not pleased with that answer. But is there a particular training that institutions should give students, faculty, alumni, et cetera, so they highlight certain programs, or should we avoid it coming off too scripted and too robotic?
I would skip. I would worry most about robotic and too scripted, and let people be themselves about their real experiences. That's important in online videos you make. That's why I mentioned that video at the University of Toledo on how to do the FAFSA, where they had a student say, this is going to be really stressed. She actually says it 3 times. If you go to the Toledo site, she says it 3 times during the video, and it's not a very long video. She's trying to prepare people for what the experience is going to be really like. And yet she did it. She loves the school, she's happy she did it. She's not transferring, but you got to be realistic. We're not selling Disney World, and people know it's not going to be Disney World, and that's not why they're coming to us. So any effort to sort of sanitize all the communications and all the contacts at any point in the recruitment process, from the start to the finish, the people are going to react negatively to that, because it's just not the real world.
Well, you can't get a scholarship to Disney World. That might be that visit might be more expensive than the 4-H.
That's true. It might be. I've
It's
never
getting
been,
there.
so I don't know.
I have some friends that just went recently, and they wish they had a FAFSA to fill out before they went. Lexi, we might have time for one more question, and it might be one that I actually just had come in. But do you have a question lined up?
Yeah, we've got time for one more question. James asks, speaking of personalization, in an initial letter, how personal do you recommend an admissions counselor become to promote alignment?
Okay, so initial letter handwritten, could that be, we take that to mean like maybe email, or
I
maybe
think could
text
take it as a
communication?
handwritten. I would say authenticity drives everything, right?
Yes.
So if you see a student who came,
Type letter, okay, yeah.
If you see a student came from your high school alma mater, great.
Yeah.
Highlight that. If you're feigning to say, oh, I really love the author that graduated 1962 from your high school, like that's I think where the delineation is, right? If there's an authentic connection you can make, use it. If there's not, then just use the form letter.
I get in trouble every week because we work for a software company, but I always say, like, if I get a typed letter in the mail, it's going to have such a bigger impact than like an electronic mail. That's what email is short for, electronic mail. So
I've heard that.
yes. Oh, handwritten.
There's an X
James,
sign
if you
in there.
have time to handwrite letters, go for it. There's no way that does not make some kind of impact, because who even sees handwritten things anymore other than like Post-it notes around a desk? So.
Right. And bringing up alumni participation again, a number of institutions I work with have alumni board members, board of trustees members, regents, et cetera, write letters or more like thank you cards essentially to accepted students. Another good strategy as well.
But authenticity is key. No matter what you communicate, if you're
Yes.
being real, that is impactful. Bob, anything on it?
I'd go back to the beginning again, and this will apply to some of the people here and not everyone. If you receive self-reported SAT or ACT scores from tests that people take in high school, treat those like the gold they really are. And I would have a personal contact from an admissions counselor to every person who looks like you want to know. You get a whole profile of the people when you get one of those. Chances are you don't want to enroll every single one you get, but have an admissions counselor look at the ones that come from their territory, Don't throw them into your general inquiry pool like they're just any other kind of inquiry, because they're not. And have a direct contact with them just to say, I'm really happy you sent this to us, and I'm your person. I'm your guy, I'm your gal at the university, at the college. And I just want you to know, if you have any questions that come up anytime during this, I'm here for you. And that can be with a text, that can be with an email, whatever is appropriate to your system. The important thing is to reach out to that person and acknowledge that they're as special as they truly are. And don't worry about whether you're their first choice, or second choice, or third choice, because if you're second or third, this is a great opportunity to get ahead of the first choice, because the first choice probably isn't doing that. And who knows? If you're in the top 5 schools that somebody says they're considering, when you get a self-reported test score like that, then they're in your recruitment bag, and they should be. Again, that won't apply to everyone, but it certainly will apply to some. And there are many schools that do that. You certainly don't want to be the one in your competitive set that does not do that. If other ones are doing it, then you're really you're shooting yourself in the foot at that point.
Awesome. Lexi was way ahead of me. She put Bob's contact information in there. Bob, you are such a great guest. Thank you so much for being on this episode of For Your Institution.
Happy to be here. Had a good time. Hope people liked it, and there were at least 1 or 2 good tips that people can use.
Awesome. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Thanks for reaching out in the chat and making yourself available to talk to other people in the higher ed community, as Natalie did. That's awesome. So next in 2 weeks, I can talk. In 2 weeks, we're going to have another episode. Mike, our topic will be
storytelling, your competitive advantage. So that's with Neil Ford. A couple things very quickly. Follow Bob on social media, Higher Ed Marketing on Twitter. Lexi put in the links. You should sign up for his newsletter. It is invaluable. Neil Ford, speaking of social media, prep yourself. Neil is an amazing storyteller. If you go on YouTube, his last name is spelled F-O-A-R-D. His very quick hit videos are incredibly impactful. It'll give you a sense of what we're going to talk about in our next session.
Now I'm nervous. I'll have to prep.
Oh, yes.
You made me nervous. No, that's great. Thank you everyone for joining us at FYI. Don't forget, check out our YouTube page to see past episodes, and have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks for you.